My name is Ashley Zula. I'm the Vice President for Enrollment Management and Financial Aid, and we're very excited that you're joining us today for our FAFSA information session. Obviously, there's a lot of changes with the FAFSA. It may be a little different than maybe if you've done it before. So we'll see how that goes moving forward, but we're here to answer questions for you, teach you about the new FAFSA, and basically walk alongside you for questions, concerns, anything. Some housekeeping items. If you can hold your questions till the end, then we will have some different parts to ask questions. If you're not comfortable asking questions to the larger group, we can also put you in breakout sessions if you want to ask Michelle some different specific questions. So we can help you if you want to private message, if you have questions too that you're just not quite sure about, we can help you in this whole process. So I don't talk too long. I'm going to turn things over to our Director of Financial Aid, Michelle Work. So Michelle, it's all yours.
Welcome, everyone. We're so happy to have you here for the 24-25 FAFSA information session. We're going to go ahead and get started. The purpose of this session, we're just going to run through some of the highlights of the FAFSA changes that have occurred for the 24-25 school year. We're going to touch base on some of the common mistakes that have been made, some common FAQs that we have been hearing. But really, mainly, we want to open this up to whatever questions you might have. So I apologize if it feels like I'm kind of rushing through this. Please feel free to jot down some questions, and we'll be sure to address all of those at the end of the session. So we'll get started here. One of the most common questions that we often hear is, why do I have to fill out the FAFSA? Does it do me any good? Should I even bother filling it out? The answer to that is always a resounding yes. Yes, you should always fill out the FAFSA. It is the federal form. It's used to determine your student eligibility for not only federal programs, so the federal Pell Grant, it also is used to determine state grant eligibility, especially in the state of Pennsylvania, where there's a number of different state grant programs that the FAFSA is used to determine student eligibility. And then also school programs. So most schools have institutional aid that we can award based on financial need of the student. And we need to have that FAFSA data in order to be able to award those funds. So again, yes, it is always a good idea to complete that FAFSA. Now, for the upcoming school year, 24-25, you will want to utilize 2022 federal income tax data. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in some future slides. But again, just so you're aware, we are using 2022 income tax data. So the first step to completing the FAFSA is having an FSA student ID or contributor ID. You'll want to go to studentaid.gov/FSA-ID. You will create that ID, and they recommend that you do that at least 4 days prior to completing the FAFSA. The reason for that is because the government will then do some background checks as far as Social Security Administration verifying your identity, things like that. And then you should get an email confirmation saying that, yes, they have been able to verify your identity and your FSA ID is ready to use. Now, what we've been hearing is that a lot of people are not getting that confirmation email. Maybe it's going to spam. We're not really sure. So we would recommend 2 to 3 days after completing that FSA ID sign up, go back into the FAFSA and go ahead and try to log in. You'll get a pop-up that will tell you that your ID has not yet been verified if that is still under review. Otherwise, you'll be able to log in and go ahead and complete that FAFSA. The FSA ID and password is a legal signature for both the student and the contributors. Email addresses are required in order to create that account. And it is very important that the student and all contributors use separate email addresses. If a parent tries to use the same email address to create a student and their own FSA ID and password, it will create a lot of mix up with that ID and password, and it is kind of a hassle to get that fixed. So always the student and each contributor needs to have their own separate independent email address to set up that account. And then it is recommended that you set up or use an authenticator app for the two-step verification. Google Authenticator and Microsoft Authenticator are free to download. They are available on Android and iOS or Apple platforms. Again, not required, but it is strongly encouraged that you use one of those applications. So a few things that you want to gather together and prepare as you get ready to complete the FAFSA. Obviously, social security numbers for students and all contributors. You'll want to have those email addresses. Again, the 2022 federal income tax returns, your current bank statements, records of investment accounts, including values of any profit-bearing farms and or small businesses. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a couple of slides. Of course, you'll want to have that FSA ID and password. Good idea to have that jotted down. Current records of any stocks, bonds, mutual funds, any other investment items. And then something kind of new for this year is total child support from the most recently completed calendar year. So if you're just now filling out the 24-25 FAFSA, you will want to have total child support for the 2023 calendar year. One of the other common questions that we get is independent versus dependent student. We have a lot of situations where maybe a student has already moved out of the parent's home, has their own job, completely financially independent, and the parent says, oh, my student is an independent student. Unfortunately, in the eyes of the federal government, they are not an independent student when it comes to federal student aid. You can see there at the bottom of the page, we listed some special circumstances. If the student was declared as a homeless youth by a high school guidance counselor or other administration, if they are an emancipated minor, if the student has been placed in foster care after the age of 12, or they are currently or have in the past since the age of 12 been placed in a legal guardianship situation, those are just a few of the cases where your student could be declared an independent student. Obviously, if the student is married, they would be declared an independent student. Otherwise, chances are that student is going to be a dependent student and will need at least one parent to contribute to the FAFSA information. As far as the contributor information required on the FAFSA, and you may notice if some of you out there are veterans, we're using the word contributor and not parent. That is something new this year with the FAFSA form. Federal Student Aid is calling it a contributor, not just a parent. So if the biological parents, and I need to stress that word, if the biological parents are married and living together, and they did file a joint 2022 tax return, only one parent needs to have that FSA ID and password, and that parent can then complete the FAFSA on behalf of both of the parents together. If biological parents are married and filed separately for their 2022 tax return, both biological parents will need to have that FSA ID and password. Both will need to be invited as contributors to the FAFSA. They will need to log in independently and complete each section, as well as the student. If the biological parents are not married, but are still living together, again, same situation. Both parents will need to have an FSA ID. They will both need to be invited as contributors, and they will both need to complete the parent portion or contributor portion of the FAFSA. If the biological parents are divorced or separated, it's no longer the parent that the student lived with. So in the past, it was wherever the student lived for the previous 12 months, that was the parent of record on the FAFSA. This year, one of the biggest changes is FAFSA wants you to use the parent who provided the most support in the last 12 months. So just for example, mom and dad are divorced. Mom has now remarried. Mom is a stay-at-home mom, does not work, but has remarried, and stepfather is in the picture. If dad, biological dad, is providing child support and mom, biological mom, has no income, the parent of record in that situation would need to be biological father. Even though stepdad has the income and maybe has a higher income, it goes back to the biological parents in every situation. So then, like I said, you would have to use the biological father as the parent of record. If it is a 50-50 custody situation and both parents provide the exact same amount of support, then again, it goes back to the parent with the higher income in that situation. So then taking our example, and if mom is in fact the contributor that will be the parent of record, mom still needs to use new husband's or stepfather's income on that FAFSA. It will need to be reported. And then again, you go back to depending on whether mom and stepdad filed jointly or filed separately, whether or not they'll both need to be invited as contributors. So there's some crazy mixed up scenarios in there, and that's why we have the Q&A afterwards. And also we're offering some breakout sessions. If you need to discuss your particular situation, we're happy to talk through that and give you some hints and tips and tricks and some guidance on exactly how to proceed there. Also of note, adoptive parents are treated just like biological parents. So same rules there would apply. When you're ready to fill out that FAFSA, you're going to go to studentaid.gov/FAFSA. Federal tax information will be transferred directly from the IRS into the tax form. Again, if we have some veterans here tonight, you'll remember that it was called the data retrieval tool. You had to click a bunch of buttons. It took you out to the IRS website. You had to enter your information, and you saw that transfer taking place. That's something that's very different. Again, this year, you will not see any of that transfer of data. You're simply going to click a box that says, yes, I allow you to transfer it. And then it's all going to happen behind the scenes. So it's a very simplified, streamlined process. So the student is actually going to start this process. They're going to log in with their FSA ID and password. They will then invite the contributors, whether that's mom and dad or stepdad. They'll send an invite to the contributor once they have completed the student portion of the FAFSA. Once you receive that invite, the contributor will then go log in and complete their own sections of the FAFSA. You will no longer be able to see each other's information. So once the student section is done, they will have no access to the parent section and vice versa. Parents, contributors, when you're logging in, you will not see what your student has already filled out. Only the student can see that. So we get to that consent and approval. It is a requirement for every contributor on the FAFSA to provide their consent to have federal tax information pulled directly from the IRS and then approve for it to be disclosed to schools and state grant agencies. Now, even if you do not file a FAFSA, and this goes for both student and contributor, if your student did not work in 2022 and did not file a FAFSA, you still want to provide and must provide that consent and disclosure. Essentially what that's going to do is it allows the IRS to provide confirmation that you are a non-tax filer. And again, that goes for the student and the contributors. Consent and approval is required even if the contributor did not file a tax return. So again, it is imperative for everyone accessing the FAFSA that you check that consent and approval box. Otherwise, the FAFSA will be rejected and the student will not be eligible for any federal aid. So how do you provide that consent and approval? I'm glad you asked. I'm going to show you. This is the screen that you will see. Both the student and the contributor will see this screen that says, please provide consent or you will be ineligible for federal student aid. You'll see there's quite a bit of information there provided. You'll want to scroll all the way to the bottom, and then you'll click there in the bottom right-hand corner, I approve, which is giving your consent for that information to be transferred. There are some cases where a dependent student may have some unusual circumstances, and I would recommend that you speak to your financial aid office at your school. We hope it's going to be at Thiel. But if not, we do recommend that you talk to the financial aid office at your school. So a lot of times what we see here, because it lists scholarships. No, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. If there is an unusual circumstance where a parent is unwilling to provide any information for the FAFSA, This is the screen that your student will see, and they can check yes or no. Now, what we have seen, and I don't know if it's the way that the question is worded, or if the student is maybe just not thoroughly reading the question, but we're getting a lot of calls, and I'm hearing, within, other schools and other financial aid professionals, that a lot of students are clicking yes to this box, which then does eliminate them from potentially all federal aid, but definitely from a federal Pell Grant situation. And they would then only be eligible for unsubsidized loan. So I just want to call your attention to this because it is a question that has been answered incorrectly oftentimes, and it is very rare that this situation would occur. The next question your students are going to see is questions about, again, I would stress these are biological parents, not mom and stepdad or dad and stepmom. This is, again, referring to just simply the biological parents. Are they married to each other? Do they live together? And if one provides more financial support than the other? So your student is going to answer these questions, and that's going to guide them through the contributor process. They will then provide parents, other parents, and this would be whatever parent is then considered the parent of record or the contributor. And then if there is a step parent involved, that's where the student will enter this information. So as you can see, the student is going to need to know first and last name, date of birth, social security number, and an email address for those contributors or parents that are going to be listed on the FAFSA. Make sure you're sharing that information with your student, or preferably sitting with the student while they are completing this information. And I will just make note very quickly that the social security number, first and last name, need to match what is on the social security card for each contributor. We've seen situations where there is a name change through marriage or divorce, and you forget to change your name on your social security card. This page must match what is on your social security card in order for you to be able to log in, complete, and also create that FSA ID and password. So make note of that there. The contributor can either wait to receive the email invitation, or once you know your student has invited you, you can go ahead and log in with your FSA ID and password and start your own section of the FAFSA. There's a couple of different screenshots there that show you what those screens will look like. This is where I got ahead of myself a few minutes ago. So one of the most common things that we see as far as this question about the tax return information, it does ask about college grants, scholarships, AmeriCorps reported as income to the IRS. Now, here at Thiel, we offer all of our students what we call a merit award, and that's based on academic performance from high school at the time that they enroll. So it's based on GPA. What we will see oftentimes is that students will report that dollar amount in this section, which can create issues with aid eligibility. There are very few situations where you will see scholarship or grant aid that needs to be reported as income, and you'll be notified by the college with a special form that needs to happen. So this is not just your student listing all of the scholarship and grant aid. Again, it's very rare that a student would have anything listed in this section. The parent contributor section, this is kind of the review page for the student that says, here are the people that you have requested that your FAFSA be shared with. Of course, you can go in and edit this if there are any mistakes that have been made. And then the student is going to get to their electronic signature. Again, this is going to be quite a long page with a lot of things to read. You will have to scroll down to the very bottom. I'm being told from some of my coworkers and other people in the industry that this is a piece that a lot of students are missing, is scrolling all the way to the bottom of that page and clicking that submit button. So you want to make sure, remind your students that there is a submit button at the bottom of that page. You should read through all of the information on this page, you are, again, electronically signing that everything in the document is true and correct. It is a federal government document, so you want to make sure that they are reading those items. This is the screen that your student will get as confirmation that they have completed their section of the FAFSA. Again, it's going to list the contributors that have been invited to the FAFSA. And then it becomes your turn to sign in as parents, contributors. Parents will log in, you'll see your activity page. It'll have your student's name, and it's you'll just accept that invitation to complete the FAFSA on their behalf. Again, parent is going to be offered that consent and approval. Again, I would stress you must provide this consent, otherwise your student immediately is ineligible for any kind of federal and or state aid. Again, regardless of whether you file a tax return or you're required to file a tax return, you want to click approve and consent to the sharing of that IRS information. The next screen, parents, you're going to see is, again, your current marital status. Now, this is your marital status on the day, in the moment that you are filling out the FAFSA. Regardless of how you filed your 22 tax returns, maybe you were single in 2022 and you're now married, you want to select your marital status on the day that you complete the form, not your marital status on that 22 tax return. It will then go through and ask you about means tested benefits. I point this out only because free and reduced lunches are one of the means tested benefits that are listed on here. You want to make sure, if you're checking that box, that you qualify for free and reduced lunches based on the income guidelines and not due to COVID funding that a lot of school districts have been receiving. I know a lot of our area school districts in 22 were still providing free and reduced lunches just simply due to COVID funding. But you need to make sure that you qualify based on the income guidelines in order to check yes on this screen. You'll then mark your tax filing status. Did you file a joint tax return? And I want to point out, this is your current spouse. We're no longer talking about just biological parents. Did you file a joint tax return with your current spouse? So part of the household information that's being pulled is going to come from that tax return. So whoever you claimed on your tax return. However, there could be household members that you are not necessarily claiming on your tax return, but you are providing more than half of their support. They are residing in your home. This is a screen you'll want to make sure that that information is being reported correctly. And if you need to make any changes, this is where you will provide that accurate information. If the information from your tax return is transferred from the IRS, you will not see that happen. Again, that's all going to be something that happens behind the scene. You will be asked a couple of questions based on the information that's pulled from the tax return. And it's information that's not available on the tax return, or at least not being pulled from that tax return. One of those questions is if you received earned income tax credit. And then again, you're going to see those college grants, scholarships, and other benefits. Biggest thing there is you'll need to have that tax return to know if you did get any earned income credit in 2022. One of the other major changes to the FAFSA this year has to do with assets and child support. So you will need to report, again, as I said at the top of the hour, you'll be reporting the amount of child support received in the previous complete calendar year. So we're in the month of March, you would actually be reporting the total from 2023 for child support you received. You then move down to cash, savings, and checking accounts. You'll want to report the total dollar amount in your account on the day you complete the FAFSA. Investments, including real estate. Now, this does not include your main home. This is real estate only, as if you have any kind of rental property, vacation homes, things like that. And then the current net worth of your business. So if you are a small business owner, or if you have an investment farm, which is a for-profit agricultural operation, you will need to determine what the net worth of those businesses are. Net worth being total value of the business minus any debts or liens against it. If you are operating a for-profit agricultural operation and your home, your primary residence exists on that property, you can deduct the amount, the value of your main home from that. And then moving on to what would not be considered an asset. So this is a list of some of the things that you would not be including in those questions. The value of your primary home, any qualified retirement plans, life insurance policies, any of your personal property, or if there are 529 or educational savings plans for any family members other than the student that you're completing the FAFSA for. So if it is a two-parent household, you will need to list the other parent, even though only one parent needs to log in to complete the FAFSA. You will need to provide the listed information there: first, last name, date of birth, social, email address of the other parent that would be on the tax return or in the household. Again, you're going to acknowledge everything in this form is true and correct, and then you're also going to want to scroll down there to the very bottom of the page. I believe this page for the parents is a lot shorter, and you're going to sign and submit. Parents, contributors, you're going to see this confirmation page that says, thank you for completing the FAFSA. You've done your part. Now the student is going to be notified that you have also completed your section of the FAFSA. Student can then log back in and they will be able to see their own confirmation page. On this confirmation page, a couple of items to take note of. The first being right there in the middle of the page where it says data release number, and you'll see the number 2572. That is a number that will be assigned individually to your student. I would make note of that information. Maybe just jot it down or take a screenshot of this confirmation page. Here at Thiel and potentially at any other colleges you're considering, they may want to have that information, and it may be valuable information to have available to the financial aid office. And then the other piece of information is that estimated student aid index. So again, if we have any veterans in the room, you might remember having an EFC. EFC has now been replaced by the SAI, or that estimated student aid index. That is the number that will determine your eligibility for federal and state grant aid. Again, with all of the confusion and some of the back and forth, and really quite honestly not knowing when we're going to receive FAFSA data, your college financial aid office may want to have those two pieces of information to be able to guide you through the financial aid process. So not a bad idea. Again, take a screenshot or jot those two pieces of information down. Couple of last minute things to remember. Again, processing of the FAFSA forms will not take place until sometime mid-March. So you may have already submitted, or you will submit your FAFSA in the very near future. Schools are not, there's not a college in the country that is receiving this FAFSA data. Therefore, we cannot provide accurate federal Pell Grant and state grant information to you. We here at Thiel are doing our best to come up with estimates regarding those grant options. But again, until the Department of Education releases that final verified FAFSA data, we will not be able to truly give you your state grant and Pell Grant awards. Other thing that we're getting a lot of is phone calls saying, uh-oh, I messed up. Unfortunately, we are not able to help you. Students will not be able to make any corrections to the FAFSA. Contributors, you are not able to log in and make corrections to your FAFSA. We here in the financial aid office, we cannot see or access your data to make any corrections. Once the Department of Ed does release that information, again, we're hoping mid-March. That's what they're that's the target date they're giving us. Both student, contributor, and financial aid offices will be able to log in, potentially see that data, and assist you with making any necessary corrections. One item of note: if we have Pennsylvania residents here with us tonight, you must you, the student and the contributor, must both click that submit button with the electronic signature. You need to do that by May 1st in order to be eligible for Pennsylvania state grants. May 1st is the filing deadline. So you want to make sure that you have both the student and the contributors have all clicked submit and electronically signed that FAFSA by that May 1st deadline. PA state grant is available. The website is there, FEAA.org/student aid. Again, some of the veterans in the room, you might remember that when you completed and submitted the FAFSA, it would say, would you like to go complete your state grant application? And you could just click a button and it would say, thank you, we've transferred your information to Pennsylvania State Grant. That option is no longer available. We are hopeful that it will come back in future years. So remind your student that you will need to then take the next step. Go to FEAA.org. You're probably going to have to create another username and password for your student, and then you'll complete that state grant application there. You'll see on your screen 3 different resources for help, assistance, question and answer. Federal Student Aid does offer YouTube videos. Feel free to go check those out, help walk you through the process. I'm sure that there's videos out there that go through step-by-step, question by question. Customer service is available while you're in the FAFSA. Studentaid.gov, again, you can use the customer service option there. And then if you have any questions about state grant or other resources for students, FEAA.org does also have a website with financial aid information listed there. And finally, don't forget, FAFSA will again open up on October 1st of 2024, and that will be for the 25-26 academic year. So you're going to have your students no sooner getting to school in August, and you're going to start getting emails, and your student may come home and say, Mom, I got to do the FAFSA again. I got to do the FAFSA. They're not lying to you, parents. It will be time. No sooner will they get to school, it'll be time to do that FAFSA again. So keep that October 1st deadline in mind to start the 25-26 FAFSA. That is all I have for you folks this evening. We do still have at least a half an hour, so I would like to open up the floor. I appreciate your patience and your attention as we run through this information. But now it's your turn to talk to us. So we're going to open up the mics, and if anyone has any questions at all, please feel free to unmute yourself, and we're here to help. So the question is that we submitted the FAFSA, but we didn't receive the screenshot that it was completed. We received an email that her signature was not completed. I would say you need to log back in and see if it's possible to go ahead and add that signature. What we're hearing is that once you've kind of closed out of it, you can't really go back in. So yes, if it's not giving you the option to add that student signature, you are going to have to wait until sometime mid to late March when FAFSA is released to institutions, and then you'll be able to go back in and apply that signature. What Thiel has done, and I can't speak for other colleges if there are folks on the line who are considering other colleges, what we here at Thiel are doing is you would need to contact either the athletic coach that you're working with or your admissions counselor. Let them know that you're interested in getting an estimate, and for whatever reason you can't complete the FAFSA, haven't completed, or maybe haven't gotten that SAI that we were looking for. And they're going to send you a link. That link will take you to an estimator where you can provide some income tax information. It's a secure upload of those documents. That information comes directly to my office. We then take that information. We do our best. Again, it's not a guarantee, but we do our best to come up with an estimate of what your federal Pell Grant and Pennsylvania State Grant will be, as well as the Thiel awards that you are eligible for. And we will send you an estimated financial aid award letter. Again, I stress that it is estimated and it is subject to change once that final FAFSA data is released. But no, to answer your question, it will not necessarily hold up your process here at Thiel. I would say once you know that FAFSA has been released, if you can't log in and fix it, get a hold of myself or my staff. Kim Peters is here on the line with us, and Denise Owens as well. Any one of us will be happy to assist you with getting that fixed up once again the department releases the information to us.
And Michelle, I have one more question, and it's not in the chat, it's a private message. Someone asks, what is the single most, probably your biggest recommendation for them to do when it comes to the FAFSA? If you have any advice.
There are so many things. Really just take time and read through each question. And each question will also have a little link, like an information button or a help button or a resource button on the side. If you're not sure, or even if you think you are sure, use those help options and those information options that FAFSA is giving you to be sure that you're entering the correct information. And like I said, just kind of reading through thoroughly. Make sure you know what the question is asking. We're hearing a lot of, there's certain questions where the wording is kind of confusing. We've tried to go through but there are literally thousands of different scenarios that would bring up different questions. So myself and my staff have been trying to go through and kind of see what some of those different questions are that can come up, but it would be impossible for us to see every different circumstance.
Michelle, I had a question in the chat.
Okay.
Someone asked, should they be receiving packages in general from other places? Like, is that something they should be expecting, or they should just be waiting until this is released?
So I can't speak for every institution because every institution is going to operate very differently. I can tell you that there is not a single institution getting FAFSA data. So in regards to federal and state grant eligibility, no, there's no way for us to know that for certain. Here at Thiel, we are offering estimated packages where we're using, as I said, those SAI numbers, some of that information, as well as other information released by the department. And we are giving out estimated packages. I don't know for certain if other schools would be doing that. You really would have to check with the individual financial aid departments. Thank you everyone for coming. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to us today. And again, reach out to us here at Thiel or the financial aid office at the institution you're considering. We're happy to help walk you through the process.